Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the Gaming Aroma podcast. With me, your host KDB. It is your Sunday gaming chat, fueled by coffee show. That's me trying to angle this show. I'm really hammering it home now. and I am not alone this week. I have a guest who's joined me for a topical discussion, which I'll get to in a minute. So let's introduce him. He is my co-host of the Gears Intel podcast. He is podcast veteran. You were podcasting before it was cool. He's also a co-host of A Winner As You and writer for Sega Force Mega. It is, of course, my good buddy David Smillie. Hello, David. How are you? And are you a coffee drinker?
I am. I've got my coffee ready.
Good.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's nice to be here. I think I've now got into the habit, I think, messaging you every week, giving you my 2 cents on whatever you've been talking about on the podcast. This has quickly run up the ladder to be one of my sort of look forward to podcasts of the week. So yeah, I'm absolutely delighted to be on here. It's great. Thank you for having me.
That's all right, no problem, mate. Thanks for joining me this fine Sunday morning. I think it's just like you and I, obviously we both do other shows and stuff. Sometimes it is nice to just have one that's a bit more broad and you can kind of just say what you want and focus on up to the minute stuff. And I, as somebody who does podcasts, I was trying to find one that I could keep consistent and easy, and that's what this is. It's just, I can do this every week. There's not a huge amount of prep involved, not a huge amount of post-production, and I just bang it out and that's it. So that was the whole idea, and I've always intended to have people come on and just join for various chats. So yes, that's what we're going to do today. This week's episode is first of all, I just want to say, for anyone listening, David was very concerned about his microphone. He's having mic issues, but he's coming through crystal clear to me. But if anyone's thinking if there's any difference,
if I sound slightly off, I think I was complaining to you before we started recording my microphone after about just under a decade has, I think, finally kicked the bucket. So time to buy a new one.
Yeah, no, you're coming through loud and clear. So we're gonna press on because this week's episode is a little bit different. I've kind of picked a singular topic to talk about because there was something in the news that came up, and I think about this thing quite a lot, but a news topic came up and I thought, great, I'll do a specific episode on this. So I messaged Dave and said, do you want to join? And this week we're going to be having a chat about Game, and that is the retailer specifically. For some of our American listeners, I do have some American buddies that listen. Game is our GameStop equivalent.
It's a GameStop. I was trying to think of what the American equivalent is, and I was like, is Target? Is Target that? But I think GameStop is probably the one.
Target and Best Buy are more like Woolworths and stuff like that.
Right.
They have like lots of stuff.
Right. Okay.
But Game specifically, I'd say that Game is our British GameStop, and they are back in the news. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to touch on this news article and then going to give a bit of a primer about Game for those that don't know, and then David and I are going to chat about a few things. So if you are in the UK and a gaming fan, you've probably seen this news. Here we go. So I have an article here from Eurogamer. Headline is: Game staff told to expect redundancies as most workers move to 0 hours contracts. Unclear how many jobs will be lost. So, staff members at UK high street video game giant Game have been told to expect redundancies, Eurogamer understands, as the company moves most employees to 0 hours contracts. Game already employed newer junior staff members, referred to as cast members, on 0 hours contracts. Eurogamer understands the chain will now employ most non-managerial staff with 0 hours contracts going forwards. Multiple staff members speaking to Eurogamer under condition of anonymity today confirmed the changes and said the move to make 0 hours contracts standard across the business was not unexpected. Eurogamer's contacted Game for comment. Staff due to be affected by the layoffs were informed they would be contacted separately either by telephone or email. It's currently unclear how many jobs are expected to be lost. Game is currently in a transitional phase that has seen high street outlets replaced by smaller game concessions in Sports Direct and House of Fraser stores. This move also prompted the end of Game's trade-in service as first reported by Eurogamer back in January. Game has been part of the Frasers Group since 2019, when the company was accepted a takeover bid worth 52 million. So, yeah, Game is in the headlines with moving their staff to 0 hours contracts. This is kind of like one in a long list of, I would say, kind of negative developments in games history, certainly over the past decade. Now, there's a few interesting points in here. So as I said, I'm going to give a quick primer on Game, and then we're going to get into it. So let's start at the beginning, the foundation. And this is just from the Wikipedia page, so just indulge me for a second while I get this information out there, because I think it's important context for what we're going to talk about today. So, the company that went on to become Game was founded by Bev Ripley and Terry Norris as Rhino Group in 1992, with stores branded as Future Zone. A year earlier, in 1990, a separate company called Game was founded by Peter Wickens and Neil Taylor. Rhino Group acquired Virgin Game stores from W.H. Smith in November 1993, increasing their number of stores to 77. In October 95, the gaming retailer Electronics Boutique acquired 25% of the Rhino Group, the name of which was changed to Electronics Boutique Limited under license from the business in America. In November 1999, Electronics Boutique purchased a chain of retail outlets known as Game, from which the current name of the company was derived, for £99 million. At the time of the takeover, Game had 86 stores. In October 2001, Electronics Boutique Limited went on to purchase Barry's World online gaming service. The French
Never heard of that.
No, some of these names are hilarious.
Did you say it was French? A French retailer called Barry's World.
Barry's World, yeah.
I can't imagine anyone French called Barry. That is a nationality and name that just does not compute.
Yeah. So they purchased a few other retailers. And then in 2002, so here we go, Electronics Boutique stores in the United Kingdom and Ireland were all rebranded as Game, and the company name was changed to the Game Group. Despite the name change, 1% sales royalty to Electronics Boutique in the United States continued to be paid until 2006. In July 2004, the Game Group acquired Gameplay Limited, an online and mail-order retailer of video games, computer software and associated products, and started trading as game.co.uk. In September 2006, Game acquired Australian video games retailer Games Wizards and rebranded all Games Wizards, yeah, it is a good one, as Game Stores. And then here's a big moment in game history. In May 2007, the company announced the acquisition of rival specialist video game chain GameStation for £74 million. The company stated that they intended to retain the brand. In April 2010, Lisa Morgan stepped down as CEO to be replaced by Chris Bell, and then it was announced that Ian Shepherd had been appointed as CEO in June of that year. Now, here's where things start to get a bit rocky. In February 2012, it was announced that both Game and GameStation would no longer stock new titles from Electronic Arts. This was due to the games distributor limiting games credit terms. This affected pre-orders for Mass Effect 3 that following week.
Oh, I've deleted that from my brain. I don't remember that at all.
See, this is all very... I remember this a lot because I'll get to in a minute, because I actually worked for Game for a period of time. So this was, something I do remember well. In March 2012, it was announced that Game and GameStation stores would not also be stocking titles by Capcom. This affected struggling to speak. The first title affected by this move was Street Fighter X Tekken. Customers who pre-ordered the special edition from the store were refunded. In March 2012, GameStation began heavily discounting stock in an attempt to bring in cash ahead of administration. And then in March 2012, Op Capita made an unsuccessful bid to the company. The business had been in talks with Game's lenders with the aim of buying its debt and settling the bills with suppliers in full. The offer was rejected by Game's lenders. Company officially went into administration in March 2026. I'm just going to skip ahead here. And then later that month, they were purchased out of administration by Op Capita. Somebody named David Hamid was announced as a new executive of Game. And then really, since then, they have closed loads of their stores around Europe. And then, where's the next big thing here? Let me find it. As of May 2023, Game has 240 stores in the United Kingdom. Game has also re-entered the Irish market as of December 2023 inside of Sports Direct. So stores. Oh, sorry, I've missed a bit here. Yeah, this was the important bit. In June 2019, Game agreed a takeover of the company by Fraser's Group for 52 million. So yeah, and then from that point, lots of stores started to close. They moved some of the Game stores into House of Fraser, into Sports Direct, and basically as, concession stands within other department stores.
Have you seen any of those? I didn't know they had done that until
Yeah.
this news had come out.
Yeah, so basically, yeah, that's the long and short of it. And I have seen that because I remember the Sports Direct in my town now has a Game in it, but I think that was, I can't remember if this was the year of the pandemic or just before the pandemic. I remember trying to go to the Game in my town, and it just wasn't there. and I googled, and yes, it was closed down. And my town had no Game for a while, and it eventually reopened in a Sports Direct down on like a retail park, and that's what I currently have now. And I think basically everywhere now in the UK, Game exists inside another department store, so whether that's House of Fraser or Sports Direct. So yeah, it's been on sort of a weird journey where it felt like, I remember in 2012 when it was first going into administration, Game felt out of date back then.
Yeah.
And we're sort of in a position now where they've changed their business model. They focus a lot more on toys as opposed to games now, toys and merchandise and stuff like that. And obviously they've reduced the size of their stores, and now they're moving all staff onto 0 hours contracts. David, before we have a little chat about maybe why Game is experiencing these kinds of struggles or what we think they may be doing right or wrong, what's your kind of relationship with this retailer? Do you have any early memories of Game, or, were they your go-to place to buy games? But anything that sticks out in your mind over the past, I guess, 20 years now?
Yeah. I mean, I would struggle to think there exists in the UK a video game fan that doesn't have some sort of relationship with Game. That is, I guess, within our age range. Maybe younger people just have grown up and it's not been a relevant thing. But yeah, there cannot be people as sort of our age that do not have some sort of interaction with Game over the years. It was just a sort of gaming mecca, wasn't it? Like, it's this, if you liked games, this is where you went, because that was, they had the newest games. The staff largely knew games. And the trading market, when you're young and you have no money and you're sort of living on pocket money, it's your access to a lot of games as well. I was thinking about about how I used to buy games, because I mean, I guess the problems that Game are having now is I'm part of the issue, because I don't really buy physical games anymore. But yeah, it started off as one of my favourite memories of when I was a kid is my cousin, one of my best mates, and myself. We would all ask for money for Christmas, and then we would sort of like congregate as much money as we could, and then we would meet up on Boxing Day, and we would get the bus into Aberdeen, and we would go to Game, we would go to Woolworths, and we would just sort of like spend all this Christmas money on just like a stack of games. And a lot of Christmas Day would be spent making lists of games that we wanted to buy, and then like obviously Woolworths closed down, which then kind of left Game and Game Station. And then I would get the train to university when I was at uni. I would get off the train, go to uni, and then I would often have like, I don't know, half an hour, 45 minutes to an hour to wait on another train after I'd finished at the end of the day. And genuinely, I think I was in a Game or a Game Station every single day, just looking at games. I'm probably quite unique, maybe not in these circles, but that I just enjoyed walking around the store shelves, like looking at games and seeing what was on offer and how much like different games were going on the trade-in market. And yeah, it was a place I spent a lot of time. And then at some point, I guess my consumer habits just changed, and it stopped being a place that I frequented, and I remember I hadn't been for a while, and I went back in, and I just turned into like a pop vinyl store,
Yeah.
which is a bit of a shame.
Yeah. Game was absolutely, for I said it, probably about a period of about 7 years, was sometimes one of the only places I would go into if I went into town here. That we had. So when I think about the way I would buy games, when it got to the point where I would buy them myself and my parents weren't buying them for me anymore, I would be buying games from, you mentioned Woolworths, absolutely Woolworths. Like that was, we had a Woolworths, the Woolworths here in my town was kind of the place where you would buy games because there wasn't a Game for a while. I don't think Game arrived here until about 2003 or 2004. And we had a Game Station open not long after that. I'm trying to think back as far as I can to when I would buy games. Now, I remember buying Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater in Woolworths. And that was probably, if I really think about it, the last game that I bought at a shop that wasn't Game. And then from then on, any game I bought after that game came out was, I'm saying the word game a lot here. That's going to keep happening.
That's going to happen.
Yeah, would always be in Game. And I always felt like, and you mentioned it, the staff that worked in, different to other retail shops out there, it felt like the people who worked in Game actually knew about the games, at least in my experience. And so you felt like, I can remember going to ask for games in other electronics shops and stuff, and it would be like, 65-year-old Barbara behind the till wouldn't have any idea what you were talking about, and she'd bring you out the wrong console game or something like that. I've had those experiences, whereas in Game, you knew that you could ask for something or pre-order something, and there was all the staff that worked there, for the most part, knew about games. So it felt like the shop that was really serving my needs, and from top to bottom, even though, all right, it's retail and they're a business, it did feel very different to other places I would go to buy things. And I also think about buying movies and DVDs and stuff like that. That became more difficult to do before. I feel like Game was like almost one of the last bastions of like physical, a place to go and buy physical media in terms of games, because movies and CDs started to disappear and the sections started to get smaller in other shops way before games started to have these troubles. And so games kind of was always there. And I had friends that worked there, and I would go, quote unquote, hang out in the shop for like an hour and chat to friends. And yeah, like you say, look at the offers, the trade-in model that they had, and the kind of return you would get on trade-ins used to be really, really good. It was really viable to buy games, trade them in, buy, and then get another game, trade that in, trade it back in. And I think about how much bigger my collection would be if I hadn't kind of been someone that took advantage of that trade-in system. Because it was just it felt like that was part of what you did as a gamer. Like no one really kept their games, or at least I didn't. You always traded them in. And so Game was always there for me. It was definitely the place where I got my games from for a long period of time. I did, as I mentioned, I did work there for a period, which I will talk about again in a minute. But then I think there was just, it happened quite quickly where I stopped going there. And I think the main part was, there's a couple of reasons. Amazon were cheaper, supermarkets started to get cheaper.
I remember you used to be able to, I've got quite distinct memories of queuing up in Asda, because when Call of Duty would come out every year, they would sell it much cheaper than the sort of everywhere else.
£10 cheaper.
Yeah.
Like £10 cheaper. And it just became Game. There used to be a lot of incentives to go to Game, and those incentives almost disappeared overnight. And I remember being really disappointed with some trade-in values as well. I think they really reduced their trade-in value on stuff, and so I stopped trading things in. And then I would say around 2013, because I do buy digital games today, but I do, where possible, try to buy physical, and I'm going to talk about that again in a bit. But I think about there was just a time where it was like, why would I go to game when I can get this game £10 cheaper? And I have no idea how Asda and stuff were getting away with it. Maybe they were just selling those games at a loss and making no money on them because, they've got a million other products in their shop and they think, well, you're coming in to buy your game, maybe you'll buy your groceries at the same time, which I 100% did a couple of times, so I guess it worked. It was like a lost leader, but it's so weird to think about where we are now with game, because this stuff about the 0 hours contract and them still being around, I feel like game have been... without sounding too horrible, they've kind of overstayed their welcome for a long time. Them first going into administration in 2012, I remember back then thinking, well, yeah, they're not adapting and they'll be closed within, a couple of years or a year or whatever. And they're still around. They changed their model a bit to toys and stuff, but it's just, it does make me, to be honest with you, quite sad, because they were an awesome shop. You think it's a shop, it's a retail shop, it's this horrible business that's there to make money. But they did feel like they served me in a really great way. And I have loads of great memories of games. The 2 for £25 offers used to be absolutely stunning.
Yeah.
And you would get new games. This wasn't trade-ins, you'd get new games. I remember specifically when Call of Duty Advanced Warfare came out. So that would be like 2013 or 2014, something like that. I went to game to buy that, and they had Alien Isolation discounted down to like £22, like a week after it launched or something. And I went home that night spending 60 quid, and I spent 60 quid and got Call of Duty Advanced Warfare and Alien Isolation, which, 2 brand new games, which was
combo,
an absolute... Yeah, an absolute bargain. And I remember playing like an hour of Advanced Warfare and turning it off, and then playing Alien Isolation. But maybe never playing Advanced Warfare again. But yeah, you would get the odd bargain in there, and yeah, they just felt like for a long time they did really serve gamers, and now we've ended up in this weird spot where that's not really who they're serving these days. And I'll mention in a minute some of my recent experiences with game, but yeah, I don't know if you have any thoughts about why are they in this situation, and you've blamed yourself with digital purchases. I think, again, that's a big part of it. But do you have any thoughts on why they're now having to move staff to 0 hours contracts, why they haven't been able to adapt, why they've been suffering and not able to serve, I guess, the customers that they did so well for such a long time?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I've often wondered about this and whether it's just because we're living through it or there is something more fundamental going on here. Mm-hmm. And I do think that sort of like Woolworths closing down was the sort of like first, I don't know, what's the first sort of warning shot that the high street was fundamentally about to change and become something that is broadly unrecognisable from what it would have been 30 years ago. And I just think, unfortunately, I just think the changing behaviours of the consumer is meaning that sort of traditional stores like these are either going to have to change or die. HMV is another one that I'm stunned still exists, because it just seems that's another company that seems to be perpetually struggling or sort of circling the drain for about 10 years now, and it's still going. So I mean, like, fair play to it.
Vinyl.
Yeah, that's sort of saved it, do you think?
Absolutely saved by vinyl. And I was reading, so vinyl outsold... they said that vinyl had sold more. Yeah, last year had sold more than it had like since, I don't know, the early 90s or something.
Wow.
And obviously, it outsells, because there are still CDs and stuff. Vinyl outsold CDs last year, and I think there is and this does apply to games, that there is an audience of people out there who do care about quality and care about collecting as well. And I think people are... Sorry, I've kind of cut you off on your point here, but, with... streaming services updating upping their prices all the time, and people feeling maybe a bit slighted by all that, and maybe turning back to physical media, and that's why something like HMV is managing to cling on. I mean, you look at what they promote, and the vinyl section is a big deal, and they sell toys and stuff like that as well. But,
massive amount of t-shirts in the Aberdeen one. You go in and it's just t-shirts everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah,
sorry, I did cut you off.
No, it's no problem. I was just trying to think, like, obviously they need to adapt or die, because the sort of high street is a brutal environment. Uniquely because of the video games industry, it's yes, there's lots of multiplayer games, but I think largely it's a fairly solitary hobby. I mean, there's something I always wished that Game and Game Station would do. I think I was thinking about this before we started podcasting, and I've got a vague memory of being in Glasgow once and seeing HMV had done it, and they had basically converted their whole downstairs. They had like a basement, and they had put like sofas out. They had Xboxes, PlayStations, PCs set up where you could go down and hang out. I'm not convinced it would have worked, because again, you're expecting people to, trying to entice people to leave their house, where to go to a shop where they can probably have the same equipment in their house in the comfort of their own home. They don't have to travel. But I'd have liked to have seen the businesses find a way to entice gamers to come to the stores.
Yeah.
How you do that, I think, is actually easier said than done. It's easier for me to sit and say that that's what they should have done, when you're actually trying to sort of work through how they would do that. I don't know. I mean, there's been gaming cafes that have popped up in Aberdeen from time to time. They haven't lasted. Is that because it's hard to get gamers to leave their house? Like, what if you're playing Fortnite, for example? Why would you leave your house to go to a gaming cafe to give someone money to play Fortnite when you could just stay at home and play Fortnite? It's a hard ask. So I don't know.
I think the answer is. I think the answer is you can. You can. And for me, it's funny you mentioned Woolworths and the change of the high street, and and Amazon as well. I've mentioned Amazon. Amazon has absolutely changed. I think about my own town and what's open and what's closed and what we've seen grow. And I remember a period a few years ago, people would whinge whenever they'd see like a new coffee shop open. They go, "Oh, we need it. It's another coffee shop," and it's like, yes, of course, another coffee shop is opening, because you're not fucking going into town to buy your clothes or games or movies. Of course, you're buying on Amazon. So what do you expect? Whereas a coffee shop, the whole idea of a coffee shop is to go out and get a coffee, generally with someone else, to see them in person. Some people work in a coffee shop. They'll take their laptop with them and stuff like that. So that's why coffee shops are popping up left, right and centre, and good luck to them, to be honest, as far as I'm concerned. So when it comes to game, obviously, the digital explosion hasn't helped. But I think, like many retailers, they just didn't diversify quickly enough. And they tried to... they've had this model that's worked for so long, and why would they want to let go of that? Because that's where they've been making their money. And then obviously things have changed and overtaken them, and they've not looked at where the industry was going to try and actually serve gamers, like you say, to bring gamers out. How would you make people go to your brick and mortar store? I think they should have gone. So this is funny that they bought Game Station, because the main thing I remember about Game Station that made me like to go to them over Game sometimes was they had dedicated retro sections. And this was in like 2004, 5, 6 or whatever. You'd go in and they would sell Sega Mega Drive games, Nintendo 64 games and stuff that's, you walk into CEX today and it's very common, but it was not common at the time to go out and see that stuff on the shelf in a shop. And so Game Station were serving those people. And I imagine there's a reason, Game acquired them, because they saw that, that they were competition, and they thought, we'll take advantage of that and, absorb what they're doing. And Game never really, ever, to my knowledge, focused on having dedicated retro sections in their store. And For me, that's where they missed a trick. They should have gone hard on retro, repairs as well, and collectors. And these people who, for stuff that's difficult to buy, or I said not difficult to buy online, but if you want to buy a retro game, buying it online can be a risk because
it's a bit of a lucky dip. Are you going to get what you ask for? Is it going to be in good condition?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Whereas if you can go to the shop and actually look at it, then you're more inclined to spend your money. So I think they missed the trick by not doing that. I think they should have absolutely leaned harder into more expos and events, stuff that's like a gathering of people. We have a gaming convention that comes here once a year, every March for the past 6 years. I've worked at it a couple of times. I've attended it as a visitor as well. It's hugely successful. And in my mind, it's like, why is Joe Blogs from down the street running this? Because it's run by a nobody. That sounds like a really bad thing to say. It's just run by individuals, It's a private business. Surely games should have lent into things like that, cosplayers, gathering people at events in halls, in towns. I know they are involved with Insomnia Gaming Festival, I think, but aside from that, and then the other thing which they just haven't done at all, which to me really blows my mind, is they just haven't. If you think about what some of the biggest content is on the internet today, it is video games and it's gaming, it's streamers. Why Game don't have a successful YouTube channel or a Twitch channel or anything like that? It's just lean into that. Build your content output and switch your model. And it's so weird to me that somebody that, like I say, was so good at serving gamers just did nothing. Didn't kind of latch onto anything that was starting to boom in gaming with content creation and the retro boom and things like that. And they just stuck to their old model of wanting to be the shop that people go to, and nobody's going to come and buy the games. And they thought, okay, we'll tuck ourselves in the corner of a Sports Direct and sell toys instead. And I went to Game recently to buy South Park, the new South Park game that came out. Okay, so actually 2 occasions. When Alone in the Dark came out, I was like, do you know what? I'm going to go down to Game and pick it up, because I was like, I'll go and support Game. Mm-hmm. And I went online and you can do a stock check. Day of release, not in stock. And it's just like, right, okay. So what's the point? And then South Park Snow Day came out 2 or 3 weeks later. I went online. Low stock. I was like, okay, low stock. I'll go down there anyway. And I went into the shop, walked through Sports Direct to Game in the corner, walked around their few aisles they got. I looked around, and I couldn't see South Park Snow Day. So I went up to the till, spoke to the chap there. Do you have the new South Park game? He was like, new South Park game? I was like, yes, there is a new South Park game out today called South Park Snow Day. And he was like, oh, let me just go have a look. And he went out back and he was like, oh yeah, no, we've got a stack of them out there. He was like, what console do you want? I was like,
okay,
Xbox, please. And I didn't have an argument with him or anything at the time, but I just had the thoughts running through my head that you can't even fucking put the game out on display. You don't even know the game is there. And, I'm not blaming this guy, but it just shows, like I say, how different it is to an experience, 10 or 15 years ago. If you want to buy a game, you can't even do it from Game because it's not what they're selling. So, they should have gone hard into retro and collectors, repairs, content creation and events, and just kind of diversified that way. And maybe, yes, it wouldn't have been such a problem that the stores shrunk and went into little corners and stuff. But at least as a brand and as a
viable business,
that they would be there, and it'd be somebody that as gamers we look to, and it'd be like, oh no, I'm not going to buy from Amazon, I'll buy from Games online shop as well, because that's the other thing, there's no point buying from their online store because you got to pay delivery, the delivery's slow, so there is just no incentive to shop with Game. And it's a real shame, because there isn't really anywhere else that I can think of.
No, I agree. Like as you were chatting there, that wrote down two things that sort of jumped to mind as you were speaking there. You're talking about building out the retro offering and stuff like that. I mean, one, like, I think that is a niche of the gaming market that would prefer to go into a store because of the sort of buying behaviour. I mean, we said before, I write for a Sega magazine. I think a retro Sega magazine is something that people want to have a physical copy of, whereas like maybe a more modern one, people are less likely to want to have that. I mean, I'm a subscriber to Retro Gamer. I think that's one of the few successful video game magazines still on the go at the moment.
Yeah.
But it's all about adding benefits to that, because I mean, like, it just sort of made me think. There's like the main street that runs through Aberdeen is called Union Street, and it is a vastly different looking place. You were talking about coffee shops and stuff like that. All it is coffee shops and restaurants, and they're talking about pedestrianising the street. They're talking about putting like a roof over it because the weather in Scotland isn't always great, because that is a way to incentivise people into the high street again to make use of it. And I think I agree with you in that. What I took from that anyway is that like game failed, or is currently failing, to sort of change and adapt and incentivize people to keep coming into their store. And
There is no
unfortunately,
incentive.
no. And the other thing is, it's like made me think when you were talking about sort of that stuff as well, is that like it always seemed to me sort of during like my 20s there was a bit of a conflict, sort of like unspoken, like uneasy alliance between like Xbox and PlayStation and companies like Game because of the trade-in market. I remember then when the video game companies started doing the, what is it, like the online pass and stuff that you got when you bought a new game. Essentially, they were just trying to like covertly get a piece of this retro or sort of resell or trade-in market. And they just do you know what I mean? They just sort of, there was this sort of unspoken friction going on where they were just sort of trying to undercut each other at different points. So now I guess that Game is struggling. I don't think Xbox and Sony would be particularly bothered. Most people, I think now I think I heard or read somewhere now that something like 7 out of 10 video games bought now are digital. So their reliance on stores like Game are small now, unfortunately.
They won't care at all. They'll be very happy. And it is funny because I remember when the digital storefronts for, you know, Xbox and PlayStation and stuff really started to take off, the thing that used to really wind me up is the digital versions of the games are always full price and sometimes would be more expensive than what a shop like Game would stock the physical version for.
Makes no sense.
And I would be like, this makes no sense. You don't have to produce any plastic. There's no shipping.
Convenience tax.
Yeah. And they really took advantage of that. And what I will say is that has eased off a little now. And sometimes the deals you can get on a digital store are incredibly good, and they will do those short-term sales, 85% off and stuff, and you can get the digital game because, you know, they get all the money goes to them. You won't be trading it in because you can't trade in a digital copy of a game.
If you play your games on PC and you aren't the kind of gamer that wants to be or cares about being current and up to the date and part of the conversation in new games, you do not have to spend a lot of money to play video games anymore because of online stores like Steam.
And this is like I said earlier, I do like to buy physical where possible, but again, it just depends because a lot of the games you buy even in physical format aren't, you either can't run them, you know, offline. They are effectively a digital they're a disc that acts as a license. You know, some of them do come with the game on, some of them don't. Some of them come with games that need patches. Some of the games, you know, won't run unless you can connect to the internet at least once. So even buying a physical game these days is not always buying a physical game. It is sometimes, but that's just getting less and less, common. So there is no. It's annoying for somebody like me that wants, because you think about, okay, what does what does it mean if I'm just going to be buying digital? And it happens. Your games do disappear. They get delisted. I have multiple games that I have purchased which I can no longer access. And that is a worry. And then I think about the games over there in my drawer that are all physical, from generations past, and they all work today. I can put them in and there's no problem. That's just not the technology these days. So part of me is like, I can't, should I expect games of this caliber that come out today, should I expect them to fit on a disc? Should I expect them to be physical? There is a trade-off here. It's like, well, what do we want the games to do? And I'm somebody that doesn't need, some of my most favorite games in the past few years have not been AAA games. They've been small indie games, very kind of subtle, small experiences that would fit on a disc or a cartridge, and they could be a physical release. But then you'd think the demands of the masses that want bigger and better and more, you can't really expect them to keep coming out as physical. So the digital storefronts will be the way it goes, and that will just continue to grow. And I just hope that work is done to preserve games digitally if they're not going to put them out physically. But when it comes to somebody like Game, I mean, I remember thinking even like 10 years ago when they were going through all this trouble, I would look at the shops that were successful in towns and I'd be like, right, I remember at the time Apple was still, I mean, they are huge now, but I remember looking at the Apple store and there always so many people in the Apple store all the time, but they didn't have masses of stock. I remember thinking maybe games shouldn't be buying in 1,000 copies of a game. Maybe they make it limited, and maybe they just focus on the collector's editions or something like that, so their overheads aren't as large, and then they have a counter that you could go in there. You think about when you go into like a fast food place and there's a touch screen. You could buy your digital version, get your code, or it starts downloading on your console. It just felt like there was nothing. They weren't doing anything to try and stay relevant, which is why it just kind of happened. I think it's that PS4 and Xbox One generation where basically everything went digital from there on.
Yeah.
I know there was a digital store before then, but Game did absolutely nothing. So yeah, I've gone around the houses a little bit, but digital hasn't helped. But I think Game could have flourished even in a digital environment, because gaming, it's like you said, it's solitary, but there are collectors, there are cosplayers, there are fandoms. It's some of the biggest, fandoms.
I love that idea about conventions and stuff, and just because they could have sort of made themselves the gaming show people.
Yeah, they could have toured and done, rather than just being, we're this retailer that sponsors someone else's convention.
Well, there's in America you get, is it Penny Arcade Expos? We don't have anything, or PAX. We don't really have anything like that in the UK. We've got Eurogamer, and we've got the Odd Show.
Insomnia is the other one, and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, there is a gap in the market for that, because people would go to that. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, and they, like I say, they don't have to be all giant. They can be smaller. They can be localized. And I just felt like, there's kind of no, not ingenuity, I guess no want to do that sort of thing. They've just said, right, how do we focus on making profit on stock? And yeah, I think it would have required them. It's like Blockbuster, it's like, what could Blockbuster have done as well? But they would have had to completely shift what they sell and what they do for the brand to remain a thing, because it's not possible for them to maintain. And they didn't, and they went under, and they basically went under overnight. And I think about this a lot. I've mentioned on this podcast, I think about Sony, and I know I come off as like an Xbox fanboy and I'm trying to take jabs at Sony, but it's no secret that Sony are not making any money. And it's like this, if you don't diversify and change your model, you'll be finished. And especially in technology, and people, there's this news about Xbox and then potentially integrating the Steam store and the Epic store, and people say, well, why would you do that? Because it just devalues, if people can just get it on Steam, they'll just buy it on Steam and then play it on the Xbox, and Xbox aren't going to make any money. Yeah, but the fact is, Xbox and Sony aren't making money off of consoles and games as it stands.
No.
So they have to do something different. And this is what I just talked about, Asda. It's like, all right, okay, selling games isn't Asda's main thing, but the fact is I've walked into Asda, bought my game and gone, oh, do you know what? I'll just get some bread and milk while I'm here as well, and stuff like that. So if Xbox have a storefront that it's like, you go, I don't really want that Xbox game, but if I buy that Steam game, I'll buy that game on Steam, I'll play it on here, or I'll buy this, and then actually one day people will buy something else, and because they are there, they are present, they are at the storefront, and it's the same principle. And so yeah, I hate sounding like somebody that's, I'm not praying for the downfall of Sony, but we know it's no secret they're not making money.
I do think there's
and
something,
they need to change the model.
There's something coming. There's like an arms race that has got out of control at the moment.
Yeah.
Because like if you're talking about games like Spider-Man just breaking even or making a small profit, like that is an unsustainable business model to be spending what 350 million on a game that just about makes its money back. Like that is not working.
And it's not even their it's not even their IP, you know. It's like they're not them. It's a Marvel IP. And yeah, there is a huge conversation to be had there, but like I say, it applies. It's the same principle here with game. If you're not going to change, there's no point them trying to just fill their shelves with all the new games. You know, I'm moaning and saying I couldn't get a copy of this. It's like, well, yeah, because that's not what people are buying. So games should have changed their business and, like I said, filled up their shops with retro. And CEX, I've heard you and Alex talk about it as well, like how CEX are, you know, I've had issues with CEX in the past, but man, I can fucking walk into CEX and there is so much in there for me.
They're diversifying as well. See, they've just started their console repairs business as well, which is great. Yeah,
they've just snuck in, but in the back door, and taken games' entire business, the trade-ins and the, like I say, the retro and everything, and you can get new games there. You know, it's not just you can only get stuff from back in the day. No, they have everything. So, game really missed a trick by not doing that, and the same applies to the wider game industry with Sony and Nintendo. I'm somebody that thinks Nintendo are probably going to ride it out for a bit longer because they kind of have something that the others don't. They have their gimmick and their, you know, but I don't think that can last forever. And
I don't think it can last forever. I guess the difference between them and the other companies is that Nintendo make money on everything they sell, whereas like PlayStations and Xboxes, at least for the beginning of a generation, tend to be sold at a loss. Yeah. Whereas you've never bought a Nintendo console at a loss. They just don't do it.
Or a Nintendo game.
Yeah.
And they never put anything on sale. Yeah, and you know, there's all people a lot smarter than me, and like I say, I try to stay in tune with it, but it's, from what I understand, it's like as an industry, children don't give a shit about games consoles. So it's like, and don't care about physical games. You know, we do because we're old and out of touch. But the younger people, they don't care about the boxes. They want things on their phone, on their iPads, on their they just want it, you know, on the screens that they've got. And I think Xbox recognizes. I'm sure Sony recognize it as well, and they know. Then, you know, they're not stupid.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why they do try things like VR and stuff like that. They are looking for different avenues because the current games market is difficult.
Well, yeah, and the console market is not growing. This is the thing.
No.
And it's like, yeah, people are whinging at Xbox for doing this, that, and the other. It's like, they're doing it because they have to. It's like, just because Sony aren't doing it at the moment doesn't mean they're going to. And I firmly believe that if they don't change, they could disappear. They will disappear. Blockbuster disappeared. Stadia disappeared. Like, these huge market leaders, if they stay stuck in their ways. Game was a high street leader for retail. Look at it now. It's a shadow of its former self because they didn't adapt. And like I said, it genuinely does make me sad, because if I want to buy a game on launch day now, I can't walk into my town and buy it because there's no guarantee that it's going to be there. I have to hope that maybe Sainsbury's get it in stock, and or Argos or somewhere like that, and they get very small amounts of stock in. Or I have to just go to Amazon, which don't like doing. It's not supporting any of the causes that I want to support, but I almost have no choice. But I would have liked to, Game to maybe lean into the market that CEX have captured, but maybe, I don't know. Like I say, I did work at Game for a while, and the manager that I had there wasn't interested in games. He was very much a targets, profits, sales thing, which very quickly opened my eyes. I think when I worked there, I was like, the gaming, it was like a dream job, you think, great, I'm going to be working at a game shop. And the people I worked with did love games, like the other staff members, but the management was very much, no, profit targets, make sure you're selling this much disc insurance today, make sure you're selling this many loyalty cards, etc., etc. And that, I remember that being my kind of first, I guess, having my eyes opened to, this is just like a shop on the street, and they've kind of hidden it very well. And it wasn't really long after that when all the shit started to hit the fan. So that was in like 2009 or 2010. And it just really disappoints me that there isn't the go-to. What is the go-to for you today if you're going to buy a game on launch day tomorrow?
I mean, it's the store. It's the console store. It's the console marketplace. Yeah, that's exactly where I go. And I've even got tiered ones for that, because I often think about this, and Alex has to listen to me. My Winners You co-host has to listen to me moan about this all the time. I've got tiered, so like if a game comes out, I'll start in the Xbox store, and then I'll go, probably I used to be PlayStation, but now I'll go PC, then PlayStation, then Nintendo, and I'll buy games in that order. So the only time I'm ever buying a Nintendo game is when it's a Nintendo exclusive and I'm desperate to play it.
Yeah.
But I do that because I like because that's one thing that perpetually stresses me out about digital libraries, and I think why I'm so militant in terms of where I buy my games from, because I'm a like, it's just, and again, the same thing that annoys me about all these streaming services for TV, and like, if I want to watch something on TV or I want to play a game, I'll turn on my Xbox or I'll load up a streaming service and I'll look through what they are. I'm not going to turn on my Xbox, look through my Xbox games, turn on my PlayStation, look through my PlayStation games, turn on my PC, look through my PC games, turn on my Switch, look through my Switch games. I tend to just go to one place and I'll just hang out there. I don't know where I'm going with that, but yeah, like I just sort of have one place to go, and that's sort of where I hang out.
Yeah, and I mean,
lazy consumerism.
Well, yeah, I mean, but I think it's fine if it works, and like I say, and you're getting good value for money. Now, and I've mentioned this to you off the podcast, how you talked about your movie buying and digital movie buying, and how you were buying digital movies, and then you've kind of discovered that what you're buying is not maybe the best quality of movies. Now, for games, that's not the case. You buy the digital version of the game. That is the game. That is, in theory, that's a digital version of the game is better than what you might pick up in the shop, because let's say you're completely offline and you don't get the day one patch or something like that. So you are getting the full fat best version when you buy a digital copy of a game. When you buy a digital version of a movie, it's compressed, it's not high bitrate, it doesn't have the full audio. Buying the physical version of a movie is still the best way to watch the best version of that movie, which is why I highly recommend people out there. If some people don't care,
I can't believe that. I cannot believe that there's no play. It blew my mind when I was looking at movies. So there's no place to like buy and download like a 4 or 8K version of a movie. Why is that not a thing? Why?
It's starting to gain some traction. I think word is getting round that people have realised when they buy these movies that yes, they're not downloading them, they can't just watch them, and and also the quality isn't there. So I think that might change, or these services will have to do something
Hopefully.
else. But yes, for games, why would you buy physical? Because there's a couple of games I'm waiting to buy at the moment. One is Dragon's Dogma 2. One is the full version of Cyberpunk, because neither of those games I've played. And The
Same as me.
Cyberpunk one, yeah, I was just thinking, oh, maybe I'll buy the physical, and then I'm like, oh, but I've got to use Amazon, or when shall I buy it? I was like, I could just buy it on the digital tonight. And then through the back and forth actually means I still haven't bought it because I just don't know what to do. But because there's part of me that's like, there's no point in buying the physical version. Just spend your money on the digital. It's easy. You can download it straight away. And then I just get confused, and then I'd start thinking about something else. But
For me, that's the biggest thing, because it's sort of a backwards way to try and make sure that I sort of manage my relationships. It's like I've got I've got my Xbox up here, and then I've also got an Xbox downstairs. The idea being I want to remove as many barriers as possible, because you leave me, I am an inherently unsociable person. So if you leave me to my own devices, I would quite happily hole myself up in a room with a bottle of wine and play video games all night and not speak to a single person. That's my idea of a perfect night. To try and reduce the barriers where like spending time with my girlfriend and stuff like that. I'm like, the good thing about having digital copies of games, and specifically the Xbox, is better than anything else, is I can play a game up here in my office, turn the game off, walk downstairs to sit in the same room as my girlfriend, turn my other Xbox on, and pick up exactly where I left off. That is, for me, the bonus about having digital. That is absolutely fantastic.
You're completely right, and because that's how I function as well. And I think about that applies directly to my YouTube watching as well. I will often have YouTube on my phone. Like if I'm moving from one room to another, I know that when I load up the YouTube app on whatever device, it's going to pick up that video exactly where I left off, and I love that. This is like convenience and stuff that you could only dream of, when we were kids. So that's where, those sort of modern way of consuming things is like, it's inarguably just better. And the same can apply to games. But that being said, I think like you like me, you do have physical games when it comes to retro games and stuff, because that can often be the best way. Some you can't buy all the old games. I feel like if they opened up the digital stores and had every single old game ever made available on the new platforms, I'd probably just buy them there. But then there is part of me that does like the ritual, and it's the same with vinyl. I like the ritual of the case and opening the case and putting a game on and taking the time to appreciate that side of things. And that's the same with music. Like I've talked about before, how Spotify, it does devalue music. It devalues, I think, people's opinions of artists, because you can skip and shuffle.
Oh, it's
and
ruined the idea
time.
of an album, hasn't it? Like,
if you think, I mean, this is the same with a game. So when we were kids, you might have a game or an album or a movie, and that's all you had. You had that one album for maybe 3 months. And even if you didn't like it, it's what you had to listen to. A game, it's all you had to play. And those games, those movies, those albums, they might change your life. They might change the way you think, dress, act. Like, they can leave such an impact on you, because you were kind of forced to appreciate what it was. However deep that went. As we were young'uns, but I just think that's gone these days, specifically with music more than anything, and because nobody buys music. I mean, I do still buy music. I buy albums, and I've become increasingly disenfranchised with Spotify, and it does annoy me, and that I pay all this money when really I probably just listen to the same 10 albums over and over again, and really I'm better off just having the CDs in my car or something. So. And I guess the game, the same sort of does apply to games, but games are a different technology, and the concept of the technology of an album, or the format of an album, and how much space that takes up or whatever. That's been the same with a movie. It's kind of been the same and unchanged for decades. Whereas a game, what a game was in the 80s and what a game is today are it's a stratosphere apart in terms of
Yeah,
this is
absolutely.
why it's almost kind of like it is a bit spoilt to expect the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X to to function in a way that serves these older games, because it's not the same. And I've heard people say, well, and okay, I know there's emulation and stuff like that, that's a different conversation, but a movie shot on film 100 years ago is the same as a movie shot on film today.
Mm-hmm.
A game made in the 80s is not the same as a game made today.
No.
And it's a big ask. And I don't even think the people making the games back then, you hear stories of just files getting lost and erased and deleted and stuff like that. It's because nobody expected anyone to care. Why would anyone in 35 years care about this shitty little, game that I'm making? And so it's a big ask for the new consoles, I suppose, to serve that. But, there's ways around it. We've maybe got off point a little bit here, but it's, it's just funny. Like I say, with Game, the position that they're in, I mean, I think we're both in agreement that it's kind of unsurprising, would you say?
Yeah, I'd say unsurprising. Still a shame, because it's like another sort of death knell of one of these things you remember from your younger days. But again, it's just representative of the change in landscape that we're undergoing at the moment, and the high street isn't ever going to be what it was. It's fundamentally different now, and again, it's just a sign of Game and Game Station and all these companies just failing to change with the changing market for whatever reason.
Yep. No, it's just like I say, it's another blockbuster, and it happens a lot. It's happened a lot in history, and it's going to continue to happen if these places don't diversify. It's obviously, it sucks for the people that work at Game as well. The 0 hours contract thing. I mean, that's horrible, but again, I'm not going to get all into that. We've been going for a long time, and I'm going to wrap this up. I'm going to wrap this up now. I suppose, like I say, I don't really have any other final thoughts apart from I'm not surprised. It feels like, as I said earlier, this is just long overdue, and Game, despite them changing slightly to serve, and I've heard the guy that runs Game talk about how we're focusing on toys and Lego and stuff like that, and it's just like, well, then call yourself something else. Because
I agree.
You're not our Game. Cool. Well, let's leave it there. David, what else is going on with you at the moment, podcast wise? You and we are covering Gears Tactics on Gears Intel later this month.
Yeah, we've got Gears Tactics coming up. You have an upcoming appearance on the Winners You podcast doing 2008 for Video Game Draft, and we have also just recorded an episode of the podcast covering Metal Gear Solid 2. And Halo.
Fabulous.
Combat Evolved is up next. So plenty of irons in the fire.
Awesome. I will put a link to David's Twitter in the description to this. Obviously, I'm on Twitter as well at K_D_B_. David is at David Smillie 1, and we will both, anybody listening to this, I'm sure, has probably heard some of the other shows as well. Look out for all the other podcasts, and I'm sure David will be back on here again in future to lament the erosion of the industry that we knew and loved growing up. Cool. Right,
on that
thanks,
happy
David.
note.
On that happy note, we'll wrap it up there.
Cheers, mate.
Catch you next time, mate. Cheers.